Recently, CIG has added the very first form of crafting into the game with a 3.18 update. The current implementation is far from what CIG wants crafting to look like in-game, with it currently being a single menu that takes a set amount of salvage and turns it into a few items: the multi-tool, 2 attachments for it, and RMC containers. This current implementation is a stopgap to help make the salvage profession easier. But now that this form of crafting has been added, it makes me wonder what crafting could look like. First, before reinventing the wheel, let's look at what other MMOs do for crafting. One MMO that is brought up a lot when crafting is discussed is Star Wars Galaxy's crafting system. For a good look at Star Wars Galaxy's crafting system, you should check out ᵐᵏᵗ's guide, linked in the description. We will also look at one of StarCitizen's inspirations, EVE Online, later in the video. But the main points from Star Wars Galaxy's crafting systems are: you need to have certain tools for crafting certain types of items. For example, the tools to make furniture would be different from the ones needed to make guns. Then, with the right crafting tools at your crafting station, you will have a selection of blueprints for items you can craft. Then when you select a blueprint that you have, you can see the materials needed to craft the item. But crafting isn't as simple as having enough of a certain resource. The materials you have on hand have their own attributes, and just because a recipe calls for, let's say, steel, the type of steel you use can positively or negatively affect the item you make. Based on the quality of the materials, parts, and crafting equipment, you can then run experiments to focus on specific stats for the item, like making an item have as much range as possible if it was made with a superior barrel. Then finally, after using the materials and finishing the crafting process, depending on what you're trying to do, you can either turn what you made into a finished item to sell or use, or turn what you made into a schematic that factories can use to mass produce copies. Now, let's imagine if this style of crafting was applied to StarCitizen. Let's say, for example, you're making multi-tools in a workshop. You need, let's say, metals, semiconductors, gases, and crystals. You would then use the correct crafting tools, which in the world of StarCitizen probably wouldn't be handheld tools, but rather crafting algorithms that change how the crafting station creates items. But I digress. You get the correct crafting tools, so you can convert the raw resources into components at the correct crafting station, which could possibly have some skill-based minigame, or not. Then you would make components like lenses, screens, power supplies, frames, that all inherit their stats from the materials you used. Let's say, for example, the recipe calls for a lens made out of hadonite. You would then want to find hadonite crystals with the best optical qualities, either through player markets or mining it yourself. This would then make a high-quality lens that would pass its stats on to the multi-tool, giving it much better stats than a normal multi-tool. There are other aspects of the crafting system from Star Wars Galaxies, like the crafting UI and how it handles trading, that would have to be taken into account, but again, for a deeper look into its systems, I recommend the guide made by ᵐᵏᵗ that I have linked in the description. But imagine how a crafting system like this would affect the gameplay of StarCitizen. I mean, you have all of these resources with these stats that might have to be analyzed through science gameplay. You have ore fields with certain properties that would have to be discovered by exploration gameplay. You have these complex trade routes and supply chains that would be developed by players that have to be managed and defended by player orgs, all in the hopes of securing the materials and resources required to create the best items to maintain their power in the system. There's a lot of emergent gameplay that happens through a system like this, where every item can be so granularly changed by the materials that it's made of. So in conclusion, in this kind of system, the main challenge crafters will face is to make the best item they will need to work to acquire the best tools and resources. They will need to find orgs or players to partner with to enable them to be the best item crafters. Or, in ᵐᵏᵗ's own words, figuring out how to get the resources you need without breaking the bank, that is a part of the skill of a crafter. Now, I want to look at how crafting looks like in EVE Online. The economy of StarCitizen is heavily inspired by EVE, so I think it would be smart to see what crafting looks like in EVE 2. The main points about EVE Online's crafting system are: the crafters need to acquire the materials to make the items they want, then they need to have a blueprint for the item, then at a facility where they can craft, they can choose the blueprint and craft the item with the materials they have. Now, while the act of crafting in EVE Online is fairly simple, there is a lot of complexity around the acquisition and upgrading of blueprints through research, and the acquisition and automation of collecting materials and crafting. A large part of growing in the crafting profession of EVE is gaining new or more advanced blueprints, as without them, crafting is impossible. Much like in Star Wars Galaxies, research is a part of the crafting process, but in EVE, research is done to improve a blueprint rather than to min-max the item made with it. The research process in EVE involves taking your blueprint to a facility and spending currency and time to gradually improve the blueprint, reducing crafting time and resource cost, but not affecting the item's stats. For more advanced crafting recipes in EVE, before you can begin researching or using a blueprint, you must go through an invention step, where you decrypt a blueprint. The invention step also takes time and money. There is also a similar process to invention where a player can take a high-tech item and reverse engineer it to gain its blueprint. And finally, EVE has a similar system to Star Wars Galaxy's factories, where a player can set up production lines on planets to automate the production of items they have invented or researched. So now let's think about what this system might look like applied to StarCitizen. A player takes a mission to retrieve some data on a crashed satellite. When they retrieve it, they find that the satellite also had data for how to make a ᵐᵏᵗ railgun. They finish their mission and take their blueprint to their org's workshop and invest time and UEC to get it to a point where they can make railguns for a cheaper price than other railguns on the market. Eventually, the org starts making enough money from selling the weapons, so they buy land on a planet and build a small factory, and begin to mass produce the weapons to sell to other players for large amounts of profit. In this system, the crafting gameplay is mostly about engaging with the player market, and gauging what is in demand, then investing in infrastructure to mass produce what people need and want. Now that we've looked at these two very involved examples of how crafting could work, what would be the best for StarCitizen? I think both of the crafting systems have great ideas for how to make crafting items interesting. Both systems have very similar key aspects, like how to craft items you need blueprints, specific materials or components, and to have the right equipment. Both systems also have a level of automation as the end game for the crafting process. When it comes to Star Wars Galaxy's crafting system, I like that different crafting materials all have subtypes that change and affect an item's attributes. For simple items like ammo, magazines, med pens, flares, and even things like power relays, I think with this system, they would be forgiving recipes, where the material's special properties won't be too important, but still allow crafters to make these items for more exotic materials to alter each item. While for more advanced items, like entire weapons, missiles, and even spaceship parts, their blueprints might specify for specific material types or component qualities. This system would foster artisan crafters who can take advantage of unique material deposits in regions they have access to make equally unique items. And this system would encourage dynamic trading and fighting over access to these unique materials, while not preventing casual crafters from making the items they need, only limiting professional crafters from making perfect items without access to the resources that have the modifiers they want. Then for EVE Online's crafting system, I feel it encourages crafters to acquire rare blueprints and invest in the mass production of those items, specifically through optimizing the blueprint for an item. I think this system would be good for adding features that commodity crafters would want. Ammo, drinks, food, relays, medicine, and other consumables that players wouldn't care about the customization of would go hand in hand with EVE's crafting philosophy. This would encourage crafters to find, invent, or trade for interesting blueprints, then research the blueprint to increase the efficiency and speed with which they can make the item. Then set up a factory where they process materials into large quantities of the items to be sent off to market. Imagine starting your own line of armor-piercing ammo, branded with your org's name, to be sold by the Mega SCU to some private military on the other side of the verse. Putting these systems together, I think for simple items where standardized mass production is desired, EVE's system makes more sense. So the blueprint for ammo, or other commodities, won't make a distinction between what kind of lead is used, or the specific properties of the copper and zinc used in the brass shells, but would focus more on the type of ammo blueprint it is. For example, the blueprint for a normal bullet would be easier to research and optimize than the blueprint for an incendiary or armor-piercing bullet, and how refined you've gotten the production process, which could take further notes from the crafting systems of Factorio and Satisfactory, at least in a simple form. And then for more personal items, like your favorite gun, armor set, and the engine of your ship, it would make more sense for their blueprints to draw from the extra properties of the material subtype and quality. So the crafter can make unique artisan items that players can name, cherish, and form stories around, like in Star Wars Galaxies, where you might be hired by some big-time bounty hunter to make a Coda pistol with the fastest draw in the verse. So you track down a Banu Suli that sells ultralight carbon fiber, trade with an org of exotic game hunters to get high grip leather, and acquire a rare low-mass steel found in a dangerous region of Pyro to make a pistol with the best handling time possible, sacrificing range, stability, and durability for its performance in a duel, and using the best tools at your disposal and taking your time with the manufacturing and assembly as to not make a mistake and waste these materials. Then selling that one gun for a large sum of UEC. Obviously, there are more details and balancing that are not here, but I'm just theory crafting an interesting set of mechanics and rules that StarCitizen could have for crafting, and also imagining how they would affect other parts of the game. Obviously, the crafting of special items by groups of players would add more reason for orgs that are from very different areas of the game to come together. Like, for example, an industrial org selling mass-produced armor-piercing ammo and selling it to a military org for their war effort. I also think that cargo and mining would benefit from a system like this, because miners could strike it big finding a special version of a resource that is in high demand, and cargo runners would also find work being hired by crafters to move their precious cargo from factory to market. When it comes to unique weapons, players might hire bounty hunters to find and return special items that have been lost or stolen, which systems like item naming and readable item history would help with, but not to go on a tangent. I just think it would be cool if these unique items would keep a log of owners and other information to help tell their story to whoever obtains them. Aside from crafting as a profession, a system like this could also open up crafting for your profession. As you do missions for your profession, such as bounty hunting, salvaging, mining, etc., a player could acquire basic blueprints for their profession, like tools, weapons, mining deployables or consumables, and other career-related items, and then use basic crafting stations to make items they need in a pinch, or even exploring making more advanced or efficient versions of the items they need. This would give players a level of independence and let operations function for longer without having to go shopping for more ammo and equipment all the time. Well, to wrap this all up, after taking a look at some of the MMOs whose settings and systems are similar to StarCitizen, I think this could be a good framework for an interesting and fun crafting system. I also think that having crafting be slightly different from mass production versus artisan crafting would allow for more variation in the crafting profession, and that crafting can add a lot directly and indirectly to other gameplay loops. I want to know what y'all think. What should crafting look like? Should there be some kind of mini-game in the crafting process? Should StarCitizen take more inspiration from EVE or Star Wars Galaxies? Let me know in the comments below, and leave a like if you found this interesting or informative. Also, if you liked this video where I brainstormed how crafting could work in StarCitizen, maybe check out my video on how deployable shields could improve StarCitizen's combat. Anyways, that's been it. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and see you next time.